In this video, we'll continue our study of the ancient city of Megiddo. We left off with our survey of the various eras of Megiddo with the Late Bronze. As we reach the end of the Late Bronze era, we have the weakening of the authority of Egypt in this area. Iron Age 1 typically is associated with judges in the Israelite history. We noticed earlier that Deborah and Barak exercised military authority over Megiddo, and that would correspond to this era. The archaeological record indicates that there was significant destruction at the end of stratum 6A. In fact, it left a destruction level more than 1 meter deep. Some attribute this to the military campaigns of King David of Israel. It's been suggested that some of the construction associated with stratum 5A and 4B would have taken place at the instigation of David and Solomon. We find here residential structures, some of which were four-room houses, and they were built into the casemate wall. Later on you will see an artifact that is a capital in the palmette design. It's known as Proto-Aeolic, so this would be the top of a column. It's a fairly large artifact. 4 of the 13 palmette capitals that were uncovered in Megiddo appeared in this stratum zone of 5A and 4B in the Iron Age. In addition, artifacts such as stone horned altars belong to this era. You will see one of those later in the artifact photos. It's likely that stratum 5A and 4B was destroyed during Pharaoh Shishak's campaign. That would have been approximately 926 or 925, listed on the screen as Shishonk the First. Concerning Megiddo of stratum 4A, Yigal Shiloh writes, stratum 4A was built according to a new city plan, more magnificent than that of the previous level, with the exception of the city gate, which continued to be used in the location that had accommodated the city gate for many generations. So with that exception, a whole new complex of buildings was erected. Stratum 4A at Megiddo was converted into a quote-unquote chariot city, and this is referring to military forces supported by multiple horses, which explains the need for the stables. Some of the features found in these stables that convince them they are not storehouses, as some proposed, but actually horse stables, are the discovery of stone troughs and also tethering holes in stone pillars. There's evidence that in the 9th century, during King Ahab's reign, there was a boom of building at Megiddo that exceeded even what happened under Solomon's reign. Then came the conquest, as you see on the screen, by Tiglath-Pileser III, affectionately known as TP3, in 732 BC. And that inaugurates the hegemony by the Assyrians. It was during the Iron Age, more particularly, stratum 4A, which corresponds to iron 2B, with a span of 800 to 732 BC. It was during this period that the tunnel water shaft was constructed. It was a stepped tunnel that then gradually became a horizontal walkway stretching some 80 meters. This allowed access to the spring, which was located 35 meters below the surface of the mound. As we come to stratum 3, we're now in Iron Age 2C, and Megiddo has become an administrative center for Assyria. The layout of the city has changed at this point. And Shiloh writes, it was built on an entirely new orthogonal city plan, quite uncommon in Palestine up to that time. And they're talking about square blocks, large buildings. The gate at this time has just 2 chambers, not 6 chambers. When we come to stratum 2, we discover that the city is in decline and it seems not to be fortified. This corresponds in part to the reign of Josiah, who was killed by Pharaoh Necho in the vicinity of Megiddo in 609 BC. The top layer, stratum 1, corresponds to the Persian era, an unfortified city that is declining. Let's turn our focus now to some of the artifacts that have been uncovered at Megiddo. Things to pay attention to, not only the style of the particular artifact and its dimension, but also the era to which it corresponds. Notice that these, for the vast majority of these, they come from Novacek's book, which was published by the Oriental Institute. I trust you're getting an idea that one of the finest museums at which to see a concentrated collection of Megiddo artifacts is, in fact, in Chicago, the Oriental Institute. So we have what's come to be known as a teapot jar on account of that spout that just shoots out at about 90 degrees from the surface. Early Bronze 4, Middle Bronze 1. Time frame perhaps reaching near the era of Abraham and Sarai, or perhaps a little before. This was discovered in a tomb. As you study it, it doesn't seem to have any signs of being shattered and then glued back together. Sometimes it's the confines of a tomb that protect artifacts. Early Bronze 3. This is unusual. Conjoined jugs. These were fashioned individually and then kind of fixed together, and the fluids actually can pass at that saddle point. That is an opening, allowing the fluids to move back and forth. Notice the coloration, a red-brown wash. The color on this is beautiful, isn't it? This jug. Burnished and with a reddish color. Incidentally, the teapot that we saw earlier, there's a similar one in the Flora collection. We have a jug similar to this also in the Flora collection, and what I'm referring to is a general profile and also in the handle, that extra layer of clay. This, as you can see, was discovered in a tomb, Middle Bronze 2A. This would be closer to the time of Abraham and Sarah. This is an imported piece from Cyprus. A white base color and then painted over with predominantly red, but also a little bit of black, isn't it? Here is a dagger fashioned from bronze. Notice we're in the Middle Bronze era. Middle Bronze 2A stems from stratum 13. I find this piece instructive because it's evidence of the Egyptian hegemony over the era. It corresponds to the Egyptian 12th dynasty. It's a statuette of Jehudi Hotep, or some resources render it as Thuthotep. Made of diorite, Middle Bronze 2A. Classic example of bichrome ware, red and black decoration. Beautiful piece, isn't it? Late Bronze 1, stratum 9. This shape is known as a milk bowl. That owes to the white slip, not to the use of it for drinking milk. This particular type of pottery was famed for its production on the island of Cyprus. So once again, it's an exported ware. We have one similar to this in the Flora collection. The handle is broken off there, and as I recall, that should form a wishbone. That is, the two wings of the handle should triangulate and come to a point. This shape is known as a bill jug. Once again, the Flora collection has a similar jug to this. Typically, the throat of it does tilt. That's not a mistake. This is the way they're artistically designed. We're now in Late Bronze 2B. We understand that the shape of the bill jug is designed to imitate a poppy flower. So if you were to invert it, holding the stalk in your hand and then the bulbous base, if this is then positioned at the top, it would look like the bulb of a poppy flower. This photo is from my visit to the Oriental Institute. You can see this is actually taking a shot in the museum itself to give us an idea of figurines that were recovered from Megiddo. These range, as you can see in the placard, from Early Bronze 1 all the way down to Iron 2C in the 7th and 8th centuries. This is a remarkable piece. The photo on the left is from Novacek's book. The one on the right is from one of my photos from visiting the museum. We're accustomed to reading cautions in Scripture about those who worshipped the god El, the Canaanite god El, not the God of Israel. This has a bronze base with gold leaf, a very detailed little statue stretching a little over 25 centimeters high. But you can see some incisions. I expect this is where some insertions were made, either of other metals for a color distinction, or else perhaps some colored clay or plaster, or else some fine jewels may have been inserted at that point to adorn the figure further. And here, a figure of the Canaanite god Baal, made of bronze. Late Bronze 2 is the era. It stretches almost 14 centimeters high. Once again, notice the eyebrows and the hollow eyes. There were probably some precious stones or shells that were inserted there to add to the color. Scholars suppose that the position of the arm is indicating a menace, as though the idol is about to strike someone. I appreciate this photo because it gives us an idea of what that cellar room looked like when the archaeologists began to retrieve from this treasury, as they call it, retrieve the Megiddo ivories. These are some of the most famous of artifacts in ancient Israel and Palestine, and this is where they were found. The location of that cellar or treasury is in the blue zone, the North Palace. And here are some of the artifacts that they found. This griffin plaque stretches a little over 9 centimeters long. This is a game board. These little golden balls that are moved along the various positions of the board. 26.5 centimeters from top to bottom. Again, ivory and gold. I find this interesting. We don't know the length of it. That's not disclosed. But this little plaque of ivory, and notice the hieroglyphs, and you can read the message below. So this is once again an indication of the Egyptian hegemony and influence up in Palestine, in Megiddo, this major center, in the time frame of 1300 to 1200 BC, Late Bronze 2B. Incidentally, the blue paste inlay is a special recipe that was known in Egypt. They had a way of embedding blue, evidently crushed stone or something like this, and making it adhere. This is a remarkable Megiddo ivory, isn't it? The detail that is here. The figure is a sphinx. It's female. We know from Egyptian sphinx figures that some of them were portrayed as female, so that's not unique. What is unusual, and what indicates that this was produced by an artist in Palestine, in the Megiddo area, rather than it being an import from Egypt, has to do with the hairstyle, the headdress or helmet. This is not an Egyptian way to depict headdress. As far as what the Sphinx is holding, if you check hieroglyphs, this shape, it looks like almost a goblet with two vertical lobes to it, doesn't it? As I recall, this is a hieroglyphic depiction of some gift, incense or something like this that's being presented. Here's a very detailed figurine, female figurine, Late Bronze 2B, but again, part of the Megiddo ivories. I thought you might be interested in this. It's ceramic. It's an offering stand, but notice how large it is. Comes from Late Bronze 2B. So this would be the time frame, perhaps along the Judges. We're told that this design is meant to stylize a house, but it was used as an offering stand. This jug is made of bronze. Having said that, it belongs to the Iron I era, so that would be the end of the Judges, and moving on into the monarchy. That same time frame, Iron I, a bowl of bronze. This is a horned altar. Perhaps you're familiar with that concept of an altar having horns in it from your reading of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament. So I found it intriguing when I visited the Oriental Institute to see this. It's made out of limestone. The height, it's substantial. In fact, let's go to the next slide, which will give us an actual shot of it within the museum itself. So almost 68 centimeters high and about 30 by 30 centimeters square with these raised corners. Scholars infer that because it's so small as far as the square area on top, it would not have been used for animals, but rather for offerings of grain, wine, or incense. Time frame, mid-10th century. So now we're in the time frame of David and Solomon. Earlier we talked about the Proto-Aeolic column capital. This is really substantial, isn't it? The run of it from left to right, over 100 centimeters. And then the other dimensions you can see in the 40 centimeters range. Made of limestone, so carved out of limestone. This is a beautiful bowl, isn't it? Notice how smooth it is, and then the accuracy, the detail of the decoration. Simply deriving from its color, it's known as black on red ware. Iron 2A. So again, United Monarchy, David Solomon, that time frame. And this is Cypro-Phoenician, so an export from the trade that involved Phoenicia and Cyprus. Scholars say that when they encounter this, what they've come to call Samaria ware, they conclude that the refinement of it and the decoration of it indicates that it would have been associated with an upper class residence or part of society. We shouldn't let the title Samaria ware incline us to think that it was either made in Samaria or discovered in Samaria, this particular piece. In fact, they first found this in Samaria, this type of pottery and decoration, and so it acquired the name Samaria ware. But in fact, as you can see in the note, by studying the actual fabric, the material of which it's made, scholars have determined that it was actually produced in Phoenicia, and that pertains to this particular type of Samaria ware. This piece was found in Megiddo. This caught my attention because it's titled An Assyrian Bottle. So scholars say that by studying the profile and the way these are made, this is not native to the Levant, to Palestine, although it was found in Megiddo. And so, based on both the style and the time frame, this seems to be a silent witness to the fact that, yes, in fact, the Assyrians did roll over Megiddo in 732, and Megiddo became an administrative center, as you may recall, for a province or a district under Assyrian control. And here we find one of a very few, very small handful of artifacts that seem to originate in Assyria. That concludes our study of Megiddo. I hope you've come away with an appreciation for what an incredibly dense and long-lasting site this has been, rich both in appreciating multiple layers and communities, a wide range of architectural features as well as artifactual features, and also a sense of the successive excavations, starting with a German early on, in the 1900s, and then the substantial excavation by University of Chicago with the Oriental Institute, and then some Israeli excavators predominantly later on. Here are the principal resources that contributed to this study.